Laudetur Jesus Christus. This is the English program of Vatican Radio.
Hello and welcome to this edition of our English feature programme. I'm Philippa Hitchin. Coming up today, lighting up to save lives. The Rome-based St Egidio community spearheads a campaign to end the use of the death penalty worldwide. We'll be hearing the dramatic testimony of 3 people who've been personally touched by the experience of capital punishment, 2 former death row inmates and the mother of a murder victim. Stay tuned. The Colosseum, ancient symbol of the city of Rome, is lit up each year at the end of November as part of the St Egidio community campaign to end the use of the death penalty worldwide. Famous buildings and landmarks in towns around the world also take part in this Cities for Life annual initiative. To mark the observance here in Rome, a number of ex-death row inmates and other anti-death penalty campaigners held a procession to the Colosseum where speakers shared their harrowing stories of involvement in this global campaign. Joaquin Martinez was 24 years old when he was arrested, charged and sent to death row in Florida, awaiting execution for a crime he never committed. 5.5 years later, he was exonerated, released, and, unlike many other death row inmates, has been able to rebuild his life, becoming a keen campaigner against the use of capital punishment. He talked to my colleague Luca Attanasio about his experience.
Well, I was arrested back in 1996 for a double homicide. There was a double homicide in the city of Tampa, Florida. 2 people were killed in their home. One was a drug dealer. His girlfriend was a stripper. She worked for a nightclub. And the drug dealer was also the son of a very important sheriff officer. So what happens is there's this big commotion, big chaos all across the city, and a need for, to find a responsible person or persons that committed this crime. I'm going through a very difficult divorce. Divorce is never easy. But I had custody battle with my 2 daughters, who I love very much. And it came to a point where my ex-wife called the authorities and claimed that I had confessed this crime to her. There was a lot of things that the police at first, without false intention, believed or thought maybe they had a perfect lead and believed that I may be responsible for this crime. But the problem is that I was arrested, apprehended, and began a trial which was full of errors and full of prosecutor misconduct and police misconduct. That's what landed me in death row.
How does time pass by in a death row?
Very slow, because you try to make the best of it. It comes to a point where you wonder. First of all, you wonder and you think to yourself, "What are you doing here?" I used to think so much. How did I get here? What happened? What went wrong? Apart from being innocent, it was more than that. It was, what makes it happen? What makes me be here today? And you start to question everything. You question your life. You question your past. It comes to a point where you even question your religion, your faith. But you come to an understanding, and luckily I had 2 parents that were together, that helped me through that situation, and made me see through the difficult times. It was very, very difficult. I arrived in death row in 1997. There was only the electric chair. They had just executed a man 2 weeks earlier that had completely burned the upper part of his torso because the charge was so strong in the chair. And at that point, the debate was whether or not the electric chair was humane or inhumane, in the Florida Supreme Court. And I recall that it was a debate going on while I was first there. And it became a problem, It became a problem because they would test this chair every week. It was also not just physical torture that we would receive in there, because yes, there are beatings. Everybody knows that this is common on death row. But there was also mental, psychological torture, where we would be exposed to noises all night long with the keys going through the bars, or where they would come in and do silly things like give us razors to shave our legs as to say that we're going to be executed, the new guys, or give us measure our heads to say that we're going to be executed in a short time. Those are things that, when you're not strong-minded, can really break you down. Most of the colleagues, most of the people I've met on death row, they began to lose all sense of reality after the first 4 or 5 years,
Plus which you were so young, weren't you?
Yeah, I entered death row, I was 25. I lived everything up to that point that I thought was important. I married young. I married at 19. I was divorced by 24. I had my 2 beautiful daughters. I lived a perfect life. I'm the exception of most death row inmates. You know, I had everything that I could possibly want. But not only am I the exception, I'm also another reason why we should end death row, because if it happens to people like me, it could happen to anyone. My main problem, apart from everything else that occurred to me, is that I believed that the justice system would work. So I didn't have to go out and get myself the best attorney. I had money to get myself the best attorney, but I didn't need to. So I hired my personal attorney, who took care of all my personal matters and my divorce, my business, etc., thinking that he would be just enough.
Before you were sentenced to death, you were quite in favor of
Yes.
death penalty.
Quite a lot.
Now you spend much time of your life campaigning against death penalty.
Yeah. It was before death row. You live in a society where you have your sports car, you have your job, you have your life, and you say, if this is perfect, and the media tells me this is wrong, then I believe it's wrong. If the police tells me this man is doing something wrong, I have to believe the police, because I don't have time to be investigating what they The police is the police. It's above everyone, just like the judges. If you see someone like I used to come out on TV and they speak about him the way they do, saying this is a serial killer, he has killed so many children, the first thought that comes to your mind is, well, this person shouldn't be on death row 15 years. This person should be killed tomorrow. That was my mentality.
2 interlocutors that in different ways helped you while you were in the death row. One was John Paul II,
Yes.
that intervened to get you out. And also, if you could say a word about your experience with the community of St Egidio.
I think they go hand in hand. They go together, John Paul II, we were quite surprised. Not that he had done, intervened on my behalf, but that he had done it in such a short time. Normally, it's almost when the sentence is signed already that he would intervene. In this case, it was almost a miracle. When you think about it, the case, first of all, reached him, that my name got to him, and later that not only did he pray for me, which makes me feel honored, but sent a letter to the United States, to the bishops there, to get to its point and let them know that through the governor that we wanted a pardon, that we wanted, that this couldn't happen, And that was so important for me. And then you have that. Apart from everything else, you also have the community as an organization working by your side, helping you, writing you, giving you moral support, and then when you come out, helping you adapt. Because it's not about the time that you're on death row. It's once you're out, then what? We're 139 exonerees that have been released from death row. Of the 139 exonerees, about 50% of us are still intact. In other words, the other half have either re-entered jail, have either lost themselves on the streets, or have either died from sickness or killed themselves I know 4 or 5 that have killed themselves in car accidents. So to be able to come back to society and have the support of the community is very important for us. It's readaptation and reminding us that there are people fighting for those people that are left behind.
Another former death row inmate is Derek Jameson, who spent over 20 years awaiting execution in the state of Ohio.
I was wrongfully convicted, and all the time they knew I was innocent, but the appeal process takes years to get a person off of death row.
Take us back a moment to your story. Why were you convicted and when?
Well, in 1985, I was arrested for a murder and a robbery in the state of Ohio. I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio. I didn't know nothing about the death penalty. I didn't know nothing about the case they was charging me with. I didn't know the person that was murdered, the young man that was killed. I didn't know him, but he worked in my community, and I heard about it, and it shocked me to hear that, And then when they charged me with it, it just blew me away, that something like this could happen to a person. Like, why I'm being charged with this, And I should have been in college somewhere. You know, I was 23 years old.
Why were you charged in connection with the crime? Were there witnesses who gave false evidence?
His family members saw what happened, and they said that they told the police that it wasn't me that they saw, you know, and it was a bunch of witnesses. The police and prosecutor withheld a lot of witnesses that came forward after I was convicted. It's amazing how the appeal courts work, because I came 1 hour from being executed for something I didn't do. That was like if they had kidnapped me off the street and was getting ready to murder me.
Do you remember exactly what kind of thoughts went through your mind?
I was thinking about, why is this happening to me, you know? The death penalty didn't kill me, but it killed my mom and it killed my dad. And it still hurt me to this day, because while I was on death row, I watched so many people, so many of my friends get executed. And then when they found out that a few of my friends that was executed was innocent after they had killed them, it tears me up inside. But people ask me why ain't I'm angry. Anger what caused the people to do what they did to me, you know. It's 140 exonerees in the United States. One is too many. It's 140 of us, but it's only like a handful of us that could speak out to the world of what's going on with the death penalty. It's wrong. We, in the United States, we're the only civilized country that still kill our citizens. The government say that it is wrong to murder, and then they turn around and murder you.
How long did you spend there on death row, and how were you let out in the end?
I was sentenced to die October the 25th, 1985. And this is the trick they played on me. I was released October the 25th of 2005. So, you know, I've been home for like 5 years and a couple of months now.
And when you were let out, they found inconclusive evidence that you had been wrongly convicted.
Right. They knew all the time, because I'm the only exoneree in the country. When I was sentenced to die, the media put up, on the front page of the Cincinnati paper, they had railroaded over the top of my picture, because all these people came forward, and the police withheld that from my lawyers. That, I shouldn't have never been charged. I shouldn't have never been convicted.
You're one of the lucky ones, as you say, one of the many people who have now been released from death row.
Yes.
How difficult is it, the day, that October day that you were let out?
I was so happy, but I was sad at the same time, because my mom and my dad wasn't there to meet. My family was so loving and caring, so, you know, it was really hard for me. And it's still hard to this day.
You've obviously got a faith of your own. How much was that a help to you in these difficult years?
My mom, she told me, baby, when things get bad, pray. And I did a lot of praying.
Do you still find that faith helps you today when you look back on your experience?
It do. It really does.
As you say, you spend a lot of your time now talking to young people, not just in the States, but all over the world. What really is your message to them?
We need to do something about this, because can't no religious person on this earth tell me that God will be for the death penalty. Jesus Christ was executed, so think about that.
What are your hopes at the moment in terms of the support that you get as you travel around here in Europe, for example? Do you think that kind of pressure makes a difference?
Yes, I really do. I really do. The more people that get involved, we need to stop this. Killing is wrong. You know, when I first got on death row, it was guys in there they wasn't even 18 and 19 years old with the death penalty. Kids. They wasn't even old enough to vote, but they was old enough to be sentenced to die. If that ain't shocking to you, what is, you know? And I knew all them guys that was murdered this year in Ohio. I was on death row with them, you know, and I tried to talk to them and tutor them and help them the best way I could, but it wasn't nothing nobody could do for them guys. I'm speaking out now to help people, you know, see that this is wrong.
Also sharing her personal experiences here in Rome was Marietta Jaeger-Lane, whose 7-year-old daughter Susie was kidnapped and killed during a camping holiday over 25 years ago. I caught up with her to find out how she became part of this anti-death penalty campaign.
Well, it's not something that I ever in my wildest dreams thought I would be doing, but in 1973, my youngest daughter, Susie, was kidnapped from our tent in the middle of the night while we were on a camping vacation in the state of Montana. And it took 15 months for the case to be resolved, and God blessed me by allowing me to be part of the resolution. But at the end of it all, the charge for the kidnapper was kidnap murder. He was up for the death penalty. And I had spent a lot of time thinking about what was God's justice. How did God feel about the death penalty? Because I lived in Michigan, which has never had the death penalty. And I came to realize, first of all, that my faith tells me that all of life is sacred, from the very beginning to the very end, no matter who we are and what we've ever done. And that I would not honor my little girl's, the goodness and sweetness and beauty of her life, by killing somebody in her name, that she was worthy of something more noble and honorable and beautiful than a cold-blooded, premeditated, state-sanctioned killing of a chained, restrained, defenseless person, no matter how worthy of death we think that person is. The bottom line is that it would not restore her to my arms, it would not undo any of her suffering, and all it would do would be to make another victim and another grieving family. And so that has been my experience, and through the years meeting other people who have come to the same position that I have, even though they've lost loved ones to violent crime.
Not all your family, not all your friends agreed with your decision. Not all of them were able to forgive in the way that you were.
No, they weren't. And unfortunately, they have become good but sad examples of what happens to someone when they retain a vindictive mindset. It's just hatred isn't healthy. I always say that God is the best psychiatrist going, because God knows the only way we're ever going to be whole and happy and healthy is when we learn how to forgive. And for me, forgiveness is what set me free. Otherwise, if I'm hanging on to those original, normal, valid human feelings, then I'm stuck in the past in a situation that no matter what I do, how many people I kill, it will not change anything about what I have to live with now. And so I have seen through the years working with murder victim family members over and over and over again, my own experience affirmed and confirmed. I see that those people who, even, if they testified in the court trial for the death penalty, they've come to a place where they want to let go of that and even sometimes be reconciled with the offender in their case. I see that they are the ones who are able to move on in their lives. They have been set free from the ugliness and horror of the past.
Many supporters of the death penalty still do see it as a form of justice, a form of closure for victims' families, don't they?
They do. They may know all the other facts about the death penalty, that it is more expensive than a natural lifetime of incarceration, and it's not a deterrent, and sometimes we kill innocent people, and it's racist, and all of those reasons. Still, they'll say, but we need the death penalty because it's a matter of justice for the victim's family. And my response to that is that there are no amount of retaliatory deaths that will compensate to me what happened to Susie or restore her to my arms. And to say that the execution death of one malfunctioning person will be just retribution is really an insult to the immeasurable value of her life. Nothing anybody can do will be worth what my little girl went through.
There has been progress, hasn't there, towards a moratorium or the abolition of the death penalty?
There is, and a lot of it is due to the work that we do. Not just me, but the whole organization, sharing our stories, putting a human face on the experience of the death penalty, because most people's response to the death penalty is a gut-level response. If somebody hurt my little girl, by God, I'm going to kill him. And that's a normal, valid response initially. But as they hear the stories, and see the people who've gone through experiences of the death penalty, whether they be murder victim family members or family members who have loved ones on death row or who have had loved ones executed, or the exonerees, the experiences that they've gone through and the injustices in our justice system. People are becoming better educated. And also for some people, I mean, for me it's an issue of the sacredness of life. But for some people, it's a matter of economics. And they don't realize that the death penalty process is much more expensive than a natural lifetime of incarceration. And for many counties that have to raise taxes to pay for an execution, it becomes an important factor. And as people are being educated, and that's what we're all trying to do, then more and more people are realizing that if we're really going to call ourselves a moral, civilized society, we have to find a less violent way to solve our problems. Because what we're role modeling for our children is to solve their fears and their conflicts and their rages with violence. You look at the headlines and you see kids get mad at a teacher or at another student, and they go home, they get a gun, they come back and blow away half the classroom. And if we are going to change the direction that the world is going in terms of utilizing violence to solve its problems, we have got to start role modeling that in a government-sanctioned way, not just in a personal way, because the laws of the land are sort of give authority and credibility to a certain practice. And if the laws of the land call us to use violence and killing to solve our problems, then that's what the next generation is going to grow up believing. And so we have got to find a better way.
Your faith has been very important for you, hasn't it, in this journey, not only at the beginning when this terrible crime took place, but also in this journey from vengeance to forgiveness?
It really has. I mean, in the beginning, I would readily admit that I would have been happy to kill this man who took my little girl, even though I didn't know who he was or where he was. But my faith tells me that I'm called to forgive my enemies, and he fit that category. And so very grudgingly, after a wrestling match with God, trying to defend my stance, I surrendered, which is to say that I gave God permission to change my heart, because I believe in a God who doesn't violate our freedom, our free will. And, forgiveness takes daily, diligent discipline, and I had to remind myself over and over and over again that however I felt about this person, in God's eyes, he was just as precious as my little girl. And in the beginning, that's, hard to stomach, but that's the kind of God I say I believe in, a God who's crazy about each and every one of us, no matter who we are and what we've ever done. And that this person, even though he hadn't behaved like one, he still was a son of God. And Jesus had died for him too. And so that meant that he had dignity and he had worth, just as we all do, not by any merit of our own, but because God has chosen to love us. And so that meant pragmatically that I had to try to think and speak of him with respectful terms and not use the derogatory terms that could come easily to mind. When people would say to me, I hope they fry that person, it would be easy to get caught up in that language because I was going day after week after month, not knowing where my little girl was and how she was. In reading scripture, God spoke to me very clearly about the fact that I was called to pray for my enemies. And in the beginning, that was the last thing I wanted to do. I would rather have him be miserable like we were. But the more I prayed for him, the more I came to understand how important it was for him to be experiencing the love of God and care of God in his life. Because if he had Susie, I wanted him to be good to her. And if he didn't have her, I wanted him to have the courage that it would take to come forth and say what had happened to her. And he'd have had to have been in a pretty good place. And so, it just became easier and easier to pray for him and for his well-being. And you know what happens when you start praying for somebody else. It's your own heart that gets changed. And on the first year anniversary, 1 year to the minute in the middle of the night that he had taken Susie out of our tent, the kidnapper called me, and I was still living in Michigan then. And he called to taunt me, just get me riled up and get me hysterical and then hang up and leave me hanging. But what happened was that he was undone by what God had done in me during that intervening year of being able to move my heart from fury to forgiveness. And he ended up staying on the phone for well over an hour. And in that milieu of concern and compassion for him, at one point I told him I was praying for him, and I asked him if there was anything that I could do for him, and he broke down and he just sobbed and sobbed, and he said, I wish this burden could be lifted from me. And that's when I really realized the miracle that God had worked in me, that as desperate as I was to get Susie back, I realized I was really desperate, genuinely desperate to reach him. And he just broke down and sobbed and sobbed. But in that conversation, which turned out to be much lengthier than he had originally intended, he so let down his guard that he inadvertently revealed enough information about himself that the FBI were able to identify him. And eventually he was able to be arrested. And he needed to be off the street because he was a very sick young man. He had killed many children. But amazingly, and only God knows why, I was the only parent he ever called. That was what enabled the FBI to be able to arrest him. And at that point, the very day that they were preparing the warrant for his arrest, they received concrete proof that Susie's life had been taken. Even though that past year he'd been talking about exchanging her for ransom. In truth, her life had been taken from her almost 2 weeks after she'd been taken from me. And all this time I'd been searching for her. She was already safely home in the arms of God, even though that's comforting. At the moment, it wasn't quite the answer that I was hoping for.
It must have been the most difficult moment, wasn't it?
It absolutely was. I remember I got the call late at night, and I was in my bedroom and after I got off the phone from the FBI, and I was just utterly bereft. I couldn't even cry anymore. I just was absolutely desolate. Up until that point, I knew the likelihood that Susie's life had been taken. But, there was always this wild, crazy chance that maybe she's hidden away someplace and I could get her back. But that was the night that I found out that would never happen. And I remember standing in my bedroom with, my head down, my hands holding my head, and I looked up, and on the back of my closet was hanging a church calendar, and there was a verse from the responsorial psalm from the liturgy of each day. And just by habit, I looked for that particular day, and it was from Psalm 126, I think it is. Those who sow in tears shall reap rejoicingly. And for me, that was a word from God, that God would redeem whatever Susie had endured. And God has been faithful to do that. And there are lots of people like me, who have come to a place of real compassion and a desire for rehabilitation and redemption for the people who have taken the lives of their loved ones. So we just share our stories and trust that God will work through them and bless people with it.
My thanks there to Marietta Yeager Lane, and earlier you heard